My name is John Teply, and we have the great pleasure to be doing an interview with Duane, who is an artist. He lives in Portland, Oregon. He has this very interesting way of working where, at least from my impression, like detail is very important, but it's not just the detail of like trying to get something. It's like every bit of the space, every little centimeter can somehow be done better. And he's always seems to be struggling with that, and the result is you have these marvelously very original, very unique looking works that are Duane's when you see it. Welcome, Thomas. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for that introduction, John. That was very, very complimentary.
Well, you're a very interesting artist, and it's like it seems like when you do a painting, like you just really like dig in, and it's I've never seen anybody work like you do, and it's like the very act of the marks that you make create these other reality kinds of things, and we don't have your 7th generation panel to look at, but that's a perfect case in point. It's like just through the mark making, you work at getting the details of what the place looked like, but then the mark making itself creates a whole different kind of thing. Well, anyways, we should let you talk about your work. You're just sitting there shaking your head. So when you start a work and you're looking at this blank something, what are some of the first thoughts that go through your mind?
I'm generally trying to capture the sense of line. My training was primarily as a black and white pen and ink illustrator in the beginning. And then I moved into photorealistic color pencil, just because I tend to like photorealism, or at least early on I did. And I had gotten my start in my career as an illustrator for Ralph Lauren for 4 years, which taught me a lot about fashion and a new way of looking at art from the perspective of what can be reproduced via embroidery and silkscreen, which influences a lot of the kind of work that I do. I tend to be very bold and very linear and very clean with the marks that I create. I tend to avoid doing highly blended pieces because for all the years I've been involved in fashion, that will not translate as an embroidery or as a very clean silk screen. After my Ralph Lauren experience, I was doing a lot of sports identity. So the Florida Panthers logo, the Seattle Mariners, Jacksonville Jaguars, if you are familiar with those logos, they're very clean and graphical, although the lines really communicate a sense of volume and shape. And I've carried that into my fine art. So what you're seeing in the 7th generation panel is a carryover from that. And I've been battling with a desire to be more painterly, but also enjoying my natural instinct to stay very clean and linear. So when I start with a blank canvas, I'm thinking about the way the space can be organized to really emphasize the clean lines and the absence of line to communicate volume.
So I'm thinking of your sky in the 7th generation panel and the waves, either one. They are the work is a unique way of presenting those ideas of sky and wave. And it seems as if it's almost an accident of how you make your mark as much as planning it to look that way. Because it seems pretty like they're in incredible visions to imagine them to be that way without somehow there being a accidental experience in the mark making. Is that something that resonates or?
Well, so the wave shapes and the lines that communicate those breaking waves in the piece. I actually did a little bit of research and study of the traditional Japanese paintings where they were using clean black line when they were developing some of those tsunami type waves and elements. So I kind of borrowed a little bit from that, although if you look at my piece, it doesn't have any sense of Oriental at all. But the clean crest of the wave and the white caps coming off the top are a little bit reminiscent of that. So yeah, I mean, to be honest, the first piece I did that was water like that was a study of seal rock off of the coast of San Francisco, off of Ocean Beach. And I kind of stumbled across the idea of how I was going to communicate water there. And then I took it further in the piece that I developed for you and the seventh generation.
Now, how does color work in your practice?
Tends to be also very graphical. I think you'd agree. I tend to want to be very clean and very purposeful about the use of color. I tend to avoid trying to blend and be smushy with color. I tend to want to be very clean and sharp-edged with color. And that might be, my sports graphic design background and, as well as fashion. Because again, blended elements don't communicate well when they're reduced small or if they're communicated on an embroidery machine. So it's talking with you about this is making me realize just how much of an influence that had on my artwork. I hadn't really ever thought about it before, but now that we talk about it, I could see how that has influenced my work quite a bit.
So you mentioned silkscreen. Now silkscreen generally would be larger, flatter shapes. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. It's more about the fact when you're dealing with, imagine a silkscreen for a tie print. I used to do quite a few of those for Ralph Lauren, or a Madras plaid or a Paisley plaid where you're developing these little teardrop shapes and elements. They're all very clean and crisp.
Yeah.
And then, you do these black lines or these lines that end up being turned into like a deep red or a navy, and you're dropping colors in. So everything has a purpose, even though when you step back, it blends into a beautiful image. But when you get close, it's crisp and clean.
Oh, that's extraordinary. So, well, I want to shift a little bit here. How do you go about designing plaid? I mean that's an extraordinary challenge. It would seem to me, anyway.
Yeah. I had the benefit of being able to go down and meet with some of our seamstresses who were like these, 80 to 90-year-old, woman from Italy who knew how to work these hand looms and knew everything about silkscreen and what would communicate and what wouldn't. And they gave me a little bit of a crash course. And then Ralph donates money to a number of different museums. One of them is the Scottish Museum, and he would grab plaid samples for some of the biggest clans and bring them in and pin them to the wall as inspiration and say, I like what's going on here, now make it mine, Ralph Lauren. And I prefer this color palette be translated into this plaid, and I don't like these stripes as wide. And he'd give us some basic concept, and we would illustrate. Usually the plaid would be done for a sweater or a shirt. So we would illustrate our model. His name was Buffy, believe it or not. And Buffy would be standing there in photorealistic color pencil with the variety of plaid designs on shirts or sweaters, and Ralph would go, hate it, love it, hate it, the one that I love, do this, do that, you tweak it a little bit. And then the plaid would get translated, believe it or not, onto graph paper, and the squares would represent the colors of the threads that are being loomed together. And that would get faxed to our factories, either in Italy or China or wherever it was being produced. And they would follow the instructions the graph paper communicated and FedEx us back a sample. Buffy would slip it on, stand in front of Ralph, and he would say it's in the line or out of the line. And that's how everything was done.
Wow, that's a very interesting real world training.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, because there's a particular approach, a particular way of looking at design that how else would you experience that kind of thing,
Yeah. I went to art school for illustration and graphic design. I didn't go to school for fashion design, but Ralph doesn't like elongated fashion illustrations. He despises them. In fact, he prefers photorealistic. So out of the blue, I got invited to show my work to him, and I was gobsmacked when I got the job and suddenly thrown into this world of fashion. And really the bulk of our challenges were like, here's an old Navajo Indian rug. I think that would make a cool sweater, and turn that into the center element and give me a bunch of ideas for the sleeves and other elements. And he would leave the sweater on the wall, and we would illustrate all day long, all these different ideas, and present them to him. And who knew, right?
Yeah. So how does that affect just your art practice in 2022? I mean,
I tend to look at everything as how it can not just communicate on the surface that I'm using, a board or a panel in the case of 7th generation, or a canvas or a piece of paper. But what I tend to think about is how would it translate onto other things? I'm a big fan of functional fine art. So can I take that art piece and bend it and do a curved wine cabinet, which I've done. So it's a half sphere, and it swings open and closed, and it hides bottles that are hanging in the wall. What would it look like as a light fixture? Or here you go. How would it look as a coffee table?
Sure.
That's the top of a table hanging on the wall as art. I tend to really think a lot about or consider how my art will communicate on other surfaces and in other ways.
So the usual fine art way of exhibiting galleries, you have an interest, but is it your only interest as far as having the world experience your work?
It's not the only way. I mean, I have the handbags and the wallets and some of the things you've seen that I do.
Yeah.
I tend to like my work to be accessible. So doing it as functional fine art so that people can incorporate the art in their everyday life is meaningful to me. Just having, been a starving artist, back when I was younger, and living in a very small apartment, not everyone has the luxury of a big wall that they can hang artwork on. But a lot of people who have space constraints still want to enjoy art, and want to enjoy it in their everyday life. So I like to show my work at galleries, but I also like to present my work in other ways and in other venues.
What compositional elements do you think are important?
Light, the light. Here's a piece that I just did not that long ago. So I've been having fun with whales, and if you look, you can see the absence of line communicates light an awful lot, and the sense of volume, and the idea of direction, right? Not having water in front, just showing the ripples that the whale's making behind.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of things that I think about when I'm thinking about a piece, is how is the light going to move you through the piece, and how can the level of detail I tend to bring to a piece communicate the idea of what I'm communicating. Generally, I like to have my pieces be beautiful, have my pieces make people feel a sense of wonder and joy. I'm less of a political type of artist. I'm not into making a political statement that rocks somebody's world and makes them angry or really sad. I tend to want to bring joy and beauty. That's just my personal preference. I'm not knocking any political artists out there, but my roots coming from fashion. It's all about beauty. It's about making you feel good. It's about you having a sense of joy, and I carry that forward to today in the way that I do my work. I like to have my work have people rediscover something by seeing it in a different way, and having them feel a sense of joy and a sense of belonging, so that they don't feel like they need to be taught a private language, that it's accessible, that they get it. When they see it, they enjoy it. And then if they learn more about it, great. But if first impression makes them happy and they feel great, I feel happy.
I think most artists, they begin painting or drawing for those reasons, and often art school kills that. You go to school and you're taught that beauty and joy and those kinds of qualities are irrelevant or stupid. But so the location that you did for Seventh Generation Project, what is your connection to it?
Well, it's one of the most beautiful parts of the Oregon coast that I've visited. We've been here, I guess, going on 6 years. And in fact, it made such an impression on me that when our old dog Dobby was ready to move on, his last day on earth, we brought him to that beach and we walked around and we enjoyed that sunset. So that piece means a lot to me. It had a lot to do with, how we were able to help him move on to his next existence with grace. So it has a lot of personal connection for me. The the entrance to Tillamook Bay and those rocks and the waves and just that beautiful area, and how much joy it brought him as well, my dog. And I miss him very much, but so it's a meaningful location for me for that reason primarily.
You were talking about beauty and joy, in your work. Does that relate to a spiritual connection, or is that something different?
I went through a pretty dark time in my life, and I've really worked hard to discipline my mind and my spirit to, instead of being angry or frustrated, to accept, to kind of maybe move more Zen Buddhist. It isn't the world against me, it isn't the universe against me. Things happen, life happens, and moving away from the sense of being a victim of life and just being a part of life and living life. That journey has been an important one for me. And it took me a while. I had a rough start to my life, but I'm very pleased with where I am now. And it's been an interesting journey. My art has helped me through a lot of things. But I've always had that sense of wanting to capture beauty and joy, because I guess I was always trying to achieve it personally. And now I feel like I'm a lot closer to it. Not quite there yet, but I'm getting there.
Well, thank you. So we've been talking with Thomas Duane, who is an exceptional artist, and it's been a great pleasure to hear him talk about how he makes things. Is there anything that you would like to add as we wind down here?
I think what I'd like to add is that all of us should try to incorporate art into our lives and to support each other. For the longest time, I didn't buy other artists' art, and it was an odd thing. I guess it was a sense of competitiveness or whatever. And when I met and married my wife, Julie, she kind of got me out of that and was like, look at this wonderful art, and, let's buy it. And I was like, you're right. That is beautiful. Let's buy it. So the idea of supporting each other and embracing, what we each bring as a different perspective, as opposed to feeling competition or competitive. That might be the one thing I would leave with people, is the idea of incorporate art in your life in whatever way.
Thank you. And do you have a website or something that people can view your work on?
It's my name, thomasduane.com.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
And we will have a showing of the 7th Generation Project this coming July, and hopefully we'll be showing.
I plan on having another piece. Yeah, that'd be
excellent. Great. Oh, that's right. That's what I was fishing for. I know. Thank you so much, Thomas, and we will talk soon. And thank for all you that are viewing this. Thank you for spending some time with us. Bye.
Thank you, John.